What if I told you that two things that sound completely unrelated, I'm talking psychedelics and a controlled lack of oxygen, might actually heal the brain through the exact same secret pathway? It sounds pretty out there, right? But the latest science is suggesting they share this powerful hidden connection, and it could completely change how we think about brain repair.
So, to really get how this all works, we have to start with a deep and honestly a pretty profound medical mystery. A mystery that really begins right at the very edge of life itself.
Okay, so our first clue comes from this baffling phenomenon, something that seems to just defy all the rules we have about irreversible brain damage. It's like a final, totally unexpected spark. I mean, just try to imagine this. Someone with late-stage Alzheimer's, someone who hasn't recognized their own family for years, and then suddenly they just wake up. They're totally lucid, they remember names, they're sharing old memories, only to pass away just hours or even minutes later. How is that even possible? And look, this isn't just some old story or folklore. It's a recognized phenomenon, and it's called terminal lucidity. And scientists have been, desperately trying to figure out what on earth is happening inside the brain that allows for this sudden final return to clarity.
And here it is, our first major clue. One of the leading theories is that as the body starts to shut down, that temporary lack of oxygen, hypoxia, doesn't just cause more damage. Instead, it might act like a massive system reboot, forcing the brain to rapidly rewire itself and, just for a moment, bypass all those disease pathways. So this idea of hypoxia, that's the first key to unlocking this whole mystery.
Okay, so the brain's response to a lack of oxygen might be a clue. Let's put a pin in that thought for a second and turn to a totally different field that's revealing its own secrets about brain rewiring, psychedelic science. Because it turns out these compounds do a whole lot more than just alter consciousness. For literally thousands of years, we've known that psychedelics can produce these profound experiences. But it's only now that we're actually seeing how they do it. They are powerful agents of physical change, literally helping to rebuild parts of the brain.
So here's how it works. Psychedelics, like Psilocybin and DMT, they latch onto a specific receptor in your brain called 5-HT2A. When that happens, it causes blood vessels to temporarily tighten up, which reduces blood flow, and therefore reduces oxygen to certain brain regions. And what does that create? A state that mimics a lack of oxygen, a hypoxia-like response. And there's that key term again. It seems like this state is what kickstarts the brain's repair mechanisms, boosting neuroplasticity.
And it's so important to get this. This isn't just a subjective feeling. This is real, physical, structural change. Psychedelics actually encourage new connections between neurons to grow. They boost this key protein for brain health called BDNF, and they help break down those rigid, negative thought loops we see in things like depression and PTSD. So we've got this surprising link, right? A lack of oxygen seems to be a trigger in both terminal lucidity and in psychedelic experiences, which of course leads to a pretty radical question. What happens if we intentionally and very carefully use a lack of oxygen as a therapy? Now, this is absolutely critical. We're not talking about dangerous, prolonged oxygen deprivation. That's chronic hypoxia, and it causes damage, plain and simple. What we're talking about is something called acute intermittent hypoxia, or AIH, these short, controlled bursts of low oxygen that act kind of like exercise for yourselves, stimulating them to get stronger and more resilient. And what's just incredible is that science has already developed two different ways to do this. The first is AIH, which basically involves breathing low oxygen air in short sessions. But there's also this new frontier, a drug called Hypoxistat. It's a pill that actually makes your red blood cells hold onto oxygen more tightly, creating a mild hypoxic state all through your body without ever changing the air you breathe. So just to recap, we've got three totally separate things. That mysterious flash of clarity at the end of life, the brain rebuilding effects of psychedelics, and a new therapy based on limiting oxygen. And this is where it all comes together. This is the absolute core idea. All of these states, whether they're from psychedelics or from hypoxia, they don't just patch up old, broken brain circuits. They seem to trigger the brain to build entirely new ones from scratch. This is where it all connects. It's brilliant. Let's just trace the two pathways here. So up at the top, you've got hypoxia. Doesn't matter if it's from therapy or a near-death state. And at the bottom, you've got psychedelics. Now, notice they start differently, they activate different receptors, but as you follow the arrows down, you see they both converge. They trigger the exact same downstream effects, this cascade of signals that leads to the same incredible result, enhanced neuroplasticity and the creation of what scientists are calling a functional bypass. So what in the world is a functional bypass? Well, this is the really groundbreaking part. This is the implication for how we could treat the brain, maybe not too far in the future. For decades, we've tried to treat brain injury by fixing what's broken, trying to repair the damaged pathways. But this new model suggests a totally different approach: rerouting. Think about it like this. Instead of trying to fix a collapsed bridge, you teach the brain to build a brand new road around it. So, a functional bypass is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a new neural highway. It allows the brain to restore function by literally working around the damaged areas. It's not about healing the old injury anymore. It's about making that injury irrelevant by creating a new way to get the job done. And here's why this is such a huge deal. This unified theory could unlock revolutionary treatments for some of the most devastating conditions we face. Everything from promoting recovery after a stroke to rerouting the rigid thought patterns of depression, and maybe, just maybe, even creating bypasses around the damage caused by Alzheimer's. It's really a profound shift in thinking, isn't it? This research suggests that deep within our brain's response to stress, whether it's induced by a psychedelic or by a lack of oxygen, lies this ancient, powerful mechanism for resilience. And it's not a mechanism of repair, but of radical, creative reinvention.